If you enjoy heartwarming stories about bravery and loyalty, please subscribe to our channel. And press the bell icon so you never miss an emotional story that will touch your heart. The morning sun casts long shadows across the prestigious grounds of Thomas's Battersea School in London. Parents in expensive cars lined up along the street, dropping off their children for another day of learning. Among them was a black Range Rover with tinted windows, accompanied by two other vehicles that most people tried not to stare at too obviously. Everyone knew who was inside. Prince George, third in line to the British throne, stepped out of the vehicle with his backpack slung over one shoulder. At 9 years old, he had grown accustomed to the attention that followed him everywhere. His protection officer, a man named Marcus Webb, walked a few steps behind him, his eyes constantly scanning the crowd. Marcus had been assigned to Prince George for nearly 2 years, and in that time he had become more than just a bodyguard. He had become someone the young prince trusted completely. Marcus was not like the other royal protection officers. He was younger, only 32 years old, and had a different approach to his job. While other guards maintained a strict formal distance from the royal children, Marcus believed in building a genuine connection. He understood that protecting someone meant more than just standing between them and danger. It meant understanding their habits, their fears, and their routines so well that you could anticipate problems before they arose. That Tuesday morning seemed like any other. Prince George waved goodbye to his driver and walked toward the school entrance where his classmates were gathering. Marcus maintained his usual position, close enough to intervene if needed, but far enough to give the boy some sense of normalcy. The other children had mostly gotten used to seeing the protection officer around, though some still found it fascinating that their classmate needed a bodyguard inside the school. The morning proceeded normally. Prince George attended his mathematics class, then moved on to history. Marcus waited in a designated area where security personnel could monitor the school's corridors without being intrusive. He checked his communication device regularly, staying in constant contact with the broader security team that protected the royal family. During the lunch break, Prince George joined his friends in the cafeteria. This was always a challenging time for Marcus because the room was crowded, noisy, and full of movement. He positioned himself near the entrance, where he could observe the entire space. His training had taught him to notice details that others might miss, like a person who seemed out of place, someone whose behavior didn't match their surroundings, or anything that disrupted the normal pattern of the environment. It was then that Marcus noticed something unusual. A man in maintenance coveralls was working near the kitchen entrance, but something about him seemed wrong. His coveralls were too clean for someone who had been working all morning. His hands were smooth, not rough like someone who did physical labor. And most importantly, he kept glancing toward the table where Prince George sat with his friends, his attention far too focused on the young prince. Marcus's instincts, honed by years of training in the British military and then in royal protection services, immediately went on high alert. He moved slightly closer, keeping the man in his peripheral vision while appearing to look at his phone. The man adjusted something in his pocket. Marcus caught a glimpse of what looked like a small camera or recording device. In that split second, Marcus made a decision. He couldn't wait to confirm his suspicions or call for backup. If this person meant harm to Prince George, every second counted. He moved swiftly across the cafeteria, his training allowing him to cover the distance quickly without causing panic among the association. The man in coveralls saw Marcus approaching and immediately turned to flee. That reaction confirmed Marcus's suspicions. An innocent maintenance worker would have had no reason to run from a security officer. Marcus called out to him to stop, but the man pushed through the kitchen doors and ran down a service corridor. Marcus spoke quickly into his communication device, alerting the rest of the security team, then gave chase. He could hear footsteps echoing ahead of him as the intruder tried to escape through the school's service areas. Marcus knew the layout of the building well. He had studied every entrance, every exit, every corridor and closet during his first weeks on this assignment. The chase led through narrow hallways used by staff, past storage rooms filled with supplies, and toward a back entrance that led to the school's delivery area. Marcus could hear the man's breathing becoming more labored as panic set in. When they reached the delivery entrance, Marcus lunged forward and tackled the intruder to the ground. The struggle was brief. Marcus had the advantage of training and fitness, and within moments, he had the man restrained and face down on the concrete. Other security personnel arrived seconds later, alerted by Marcus's call. They took custody of the intruder while Marcus caught his breath, his heart pounding from the adrenaline. A search of the man revealed not just a camera, but detailed notes about Prince George's schedule, photographs of the school layout, and a map marking various locations including the cafeteria, the playground, and the route the prince took between classes. This was not a journalist trying to get a photograph for a tabloid. This was something far more serious. This was someone who had been planning something that could have put the young prince in real danger. King Charles secretly promoted a guard. After he prevented this from happening to Prince George at school, the police arrived within minutes of the incident. The school was immediately placed on lockdown, and Prince George was moved to a secure location within the building. Marcus stood in the headmaster's office, giving his statement to police officers and senior members of the Royal Protection Command. His hands were scraped from the tackle, and his uniform was disheveled. But he remained calm and professional as he described exactly what he had observed and why he had acted. The intruder, it turned out, was a man with a history of obsessive behavior toward the royal family. He had somehow obtained forged credentials that allowed him to enter the school posing as a maintenance contractor. His plan, as investigators would later discover, was to get close enough to Prince George to either abduct him or cause him harm. The detailed notes and photographs suggested he had been planning this for weeks, carefully studying the school's routines and security measures. When Prince William and Catherine were informed of the incident, they rushed to the school immediately. Marcus watched as they embraced their son, relief and fear mixing on their faces. Prince George, who had been kept unaware of the full danger he had been in, seemed more confused than frightened. He didn't understand why his parents had arrived in the middle of the school day, or why there were so many police officers around. Later that evening, Marcus was called to Kensington Palace. He had been back to the royal residence many times before, but never like this. Usually, his interactions with the Prince and Princess of Wales were brief and professional. This time, he was escorted to a private sitting room where the couple was waiting for him. Prince William stood when Marcus entered and crossed the room to shake his hand. The grip was firm and lasted longer than a formal greeting. "Marcus," the future king said, his voice thick with emotion, "we owe you more than we can possibly express. You saved our son today." Princess Catherine's eyes were red from crying. She reached out and took Marcus's other hand, holding it between both of hers. "You saw something others might have missed," she said softly. "You trusted your instincts, and you acted without hesitation. George is safe because of you." Marcus, who had maintained his professional composure throughout the day, felt his own emotions rising to the surface. "Your Royal Highnesses, I was just doing my job. Protecting Prince George is my responsibility." "It's more than that," William insisted. "Many people might have dismissed what you saw as nothing. They might have waited for confirmation or followed protocol that would have wasted precious seconds. You used your judgment, and your judgment was correct. That takes courage and skill." The conversation continued for nearly an hour. For the first time, Marcus saw the Prince and Princess of Wales not as the formal figures who appeared in newspapers and on television, but as parents who had been terrified for their child's safety. They asked him questions about what he had noticed, how he had known something was wrong, and what had gone through his mind during those crucial moments. Before Marcus left that evening, Prince William told him something that would change his life. "What happened today will be investigated thoroughly," the prince said. "There will be questions about how this person got into the school and what security measures need to be improved. But I want you to know that Catherine and I have complete faith in you. We trust you with what is most precious to us in this world." Over the following weeks, the incident was kept largely out of the public eye. The royal family's press office released a brief statement, confirming that there had been a security incident at Prince George's school and that an individual had been arrested. They did not provide details about what had happened or how close the intruder had gotten to the young prince. This was partially to avoid causing panic and partially to protect the ongoing investigation. Marcus, continued his duties as Prince George's protection officer, but he noticed changes in how he was treated by his superiors. He was called to more meetings and asked to provide input on security protocols. Other protection officers began seeking his advice, and he found himself becoming an informal mentor to younger members of the team. Prince George, for his part, seemed to sense that Marcus had done something special. Even if he didn't fully understand what it was, the boy began talking to him more, asking questions about Marcus's life and sharing stories from his day at school. The relationship between them deepened, built on a foundation of trust that had been tested and proven. 3 months after the incident, Marcus received an unusual summons. He was told to report to Buckingham Palace in his formal uniform. This was not standard procedure, and Marcus wondered what was happening. When he arrived, he was escorted through corridors he had never walked before. Past rooms filled with priceless art and centuries of history, he was brought to a private chamber where King Charles III was waiting. Marcus had seen the king from a distance many times, but had never been in his presence alone. He bowed respectfully, his heart racing with uncertainty about why he had been summoned. "Mr. Webb," the king said, his voice warm and kind, "please, sit down. We have something important to discuss." Marcus sat in the indicated chair, maintaining his formal posture despite his confusion. The king smiled at the young man's obvious discomfort. "I understand you're wondering why you're here," Charles continued. "Let me explain. My grandson is alive and safe today because of your actions. His parents have told me in detail about what you did, and I have read all the reports from that day." King Charles gestured to a folder on the table between them. "The security services have completed their investigation," he explained. "The individual you apprehended had been planning his infiltration of the school for nearly 2 months. He had created false identities, forged documents, and studied the school's routines with disturbing precision. If he had succeeded in his plan, the consequences would have been catastrophic." Marcus listened in silence, still uncertain where this conversation was leading. The king continued, his expression becoming more serious. "What troubles me most is that he nearly succeeded. He had bypassed multiple security checkpoints. He had convinced school staff that he was legitimate. He was mere meters away from my grandson, and no one else noticed anything wrong. No one except you." The king stood and walked to the window, looking out over the palace gardens. "When I became king, I inherited not just a crown and a title, but a responsibility to protect this family and this institution. That includes ensuring that the people who serve us are recognized for their dedication and their excellence." He turned back to face Marcus. "The role of Royal Protection Officer is not one that typically receives public recognition. You work in the shadows, unseen and unacknowledged, so that the members of this family can live their lives with some measure of normalcy. But what you did went beyond the call of duty. You used exceptional judgment, acted with courage, and prevented a tragedy." Marcus felt his throat tighten with emotion. "Your Majesty, I was trained for exactly this situation. Any of my colleagues would have done the same." King Charles shook his head gently. "That's where you're wrong, Mr. Webb. Training can teach techniques and procedures, but it cannot teach instinct. It cannot teach someone to notice what others miss, or to act decisively in the face of uncertainty. Those qualities come from within, and you possess them in abundance." The king returned to his seat and picked up an official-looking document. "The royal household has various ways of recognizing exceptional service. After consultation with the Prime Minister and the Honors Committee, I have decided to promote you within the Royal Protection Command. Effective immediately, you are being elevated to the rank of Senior Protection Officer, a position typically reserved for those with many more years of service." Marcus was stunned. He had been a protection officer for less than 5 years. Senior protection officers were usually veterans with decades of experience. "Your Majesty, I don't know what to say. This is an incredible honor." "There's more," the king continued. "This promotion comes with greater responsibilities. You will be involved in planning security protocols not just for Prince George, but for the entire Wales family. Your insights and your approach to protection will help shape how we keep the next generation of royals safe." The conversation continued for another half hour. King Charles asked Marcus about his background, his training, and his philosophy of protection. The king seemed genuinely interested in understanding what made this young officer different from others. Marcus explained his belief that effective protection required building trust and understanding with the person being protected. That it meant being observant of small details and trusting one's instincts even when everything seemed normal. Before Marcus left Buckingham Palace that day, King Charles stood and extended his hand once more. "Mr. Webb, what you did will likely never be fully known to the public. The details of that day will remain classified for security reasons. But I want you to know that you have my personal gratitude and the gratitude of this entire family. You are exactly the kind of person we need protecting the future of this monarchy." As Marcus walked out of the palace, his promotion letter in hand, he felt overwhelmed by the weight of what had just happened. He had joined the Royal Protection Service because he wanted to serve his country and be part of something meaningful. He had never imagined that he would be recognized personally by the king himself. News of his promotion spread quickly through the protection service. Though the specific reasons for it remained confidential, his colleagues congratulated him, some with genuine warmth and others with barely concealed jealousy. Marcus understood their reactions. He was young to receive such recognition, and many officers with more experience felt they deserved similar advancement. But Marcus didn't let the attention change who he was. He continued to approach his work with the same dedication and humility he had always shown. If anything, the promotion made him more determined to prove that King Charles's faith in him was well placed. He studied constantly, learning about new security technologies, analyzing case studies of security failures from around the world, and working to improve his own skills. His relationship with Prince George and the Wales family deepened further. Prince William and Princess Catherine had always been professional and courteous. But now there was a warmth in their interactions that went beyond formality. They would sometimes ask Marcus to join them for informal discussions about George's activities, seeking his input not just as a security officer, but as someone who had proven his commitment to their son's well-being. Prince George himself seemed to sense the special bond that had formed. He would seek out Marcus during school events, wanting to show him his artwork or tell him about a good grade he had received. The other protection officers noticed this connection and respected it. Understanding that Marcus had earned this relationship through his actions, several months after his promotion, Marcus was involved in planning security for a major royal event where Prince George would have a prominent role. As he worked with other security personnel to map out every detail, he realized how much his perspective had changed. He was no longer just focused on immediate threats. He was thinking strategically about long-term security, about how to build systems that could adapt to changing circumstances, and about how to train others to develop the same instincts that had served him so well. One afternoon, about a year after the incident at the school, Marcus received an unexpected invitation to tea at Kensington Palace. When he arrived, he found not just Prince William and Princess Catherine waiting, but Prince George as well. The young prince, now 10 years old, stood when Marcus entered the room. "Marcus," Prince George said, his voice more mature than it had been a year ago. "My parents told me what really happened that day at school. I didn't understand it at the time, but I do now. You saved me." Marcus felt his composure waver. He had grown fond of this boy over the years, watching him grow from a shy child into a confident young person. "Your Royal Highness," he began, but George interrupted him. "They told me that you saw something no one else saw, that you knew something was wrong before anyone else did, and that you stopped a bad person from hurting me." The boy's eyes were bright with emotion. "I wanted to say thank you myself." Prince William placed a hand on his son's shoulder. "We thought it was important for George to understand what happened, and to be able to express his gratitude directly. He's been asking questions for months, and we decided he was old enough to know the truth." Marcus knelt down so he was at eye level with Prince George. "Your Royal Highness, protecting you is the greatest honor of my life. I'm glad I was there that day, and I'm glad I was able to keep you safe. That's what I'm here for." George smiled and did something unexpected. He stepped forward and hugged Marcus. It was a brief embrace, but it conveyed more than words could express. When the boy stepped back, Princess Catherine was wiping tears from her eyes. Even Prince William looked emotional. After tea, Prince William asked to speak with Marcus privately. They walked together in the palace gardens, away from listening ears. "Marcus," William said, "I want to talk to you about the future. George will be taking on more public duties as he gets older. There will be more events, more travel, more exposure. Catherine and I have discussed this at length, and we would like you to continue as his primary protection officer as he grows up." Marcus was honored, but also aware of what this meant. "Your Royal Highness, I'm committed to Prince George's safety for as long as you need me. But I want you to know that I take this responsibility seriously. As he gets older, the threats will evolve. I'll need to adapt and learn constantly to stay ahead of them." "That's exactly why we want you in this role," William replied. "You don't just follow procedures. You think ahead. You anticipate problems. And most importantly, George trusts you. As he becomes a teenager and young adult, having someone he trusts will be invaluable." The years that followed proved Prince William right. As Prince George grew older, he faced new challenges. There were incidents with photographers who tried to get too close, overzealous fans at public events, and the constant pressure of growing up in the public eye. Through it all, Marcus was there, a steady presence who kept the young prince safe while also giving him the space to develop his own identity. Marcus's role expanded beyond just physical protection. He became someone Prince George could talk to about the pressures he faced, the strange position of being born into a life he didn't choose. Marcus listened without judgment, offered perspective when asked, and maintained the professional boundaries that were necessary while also being genuinely present for the boy who had become such an important part of his life. Other members of the royal family noticed Marcus's effectiveness. He was occasionally assigned to protect other family members during major events, and his reputation within the protection service continued to grow. He was invited to speak at training sessions for new officers, sharing his experiences and his philosophy of protection. But Marcus never forgot the lesson from that day at the school. He never became complacent or assumed that everything was fine just because it appeared normal. He maintained the same level of vigilance and attention to detail that had served him so well, understanding that danger could appear at any moment and that his role was to be ready for it. On the 5th anniversary of the incident, Marcus received a personal note from King Charles. It was handwritten on official palace stationery and delivered by private courier. The message was brief but meaningful. "Dear Mr. Webb," it read, "5 years ago today, you prevented a tragedy through your vigilance and courage. As we mark this anniversary privately, I want you to know that your service continues to be exemplary. The family sleeps more soundly, knowing that people like you are watching over them. Your dedication does not go unnoticed or unappreciated. With gratitude, Charles R." Marcus kept this note in a secure place at his home, along with his promotion letter and a photograph that Prince George had given him showing the two of them at a polo match. These mementos reminded him of why he did this job and what it meant to those he protected. As Prince George approached his teenage years, the dynamics of protection began to shift. The young prince wanted more independence, more privacy, more space to be himself. Marcus understood this instinctively. He had watched George grow from a child into a young man, and he knew that effective protection at this stage meant knowing when to be visible and when to fade into the background. There were challenging moments. Prince George sometimes chafed at the constant security presence, frustrated by the inability to do normal things that other teenagers took for granted. During these times, Marcus would find moments to talk with him, explaining the realities of his position while also advocating for reasonable compromises that would give George some of the experiences he craved. Prince William and Princess Catherine appreciated Marcus's approach. They saw how he balanced security concerns with their son's developmental needs, how he maintained authority while also respecting George's growing maturity. In many ways, Marcus had become an extension of their parenting team, someone who shared their commitment to raising George to be both safe and well-adjusted. Despite his extraordinary circumstances, when Prince George turned 13, he asked his parents if he could speak with Marcus privately about what had happened at his school years earlier. Until then, George had known the basic facts, but not the full details. Prince William and Princess Catherine agreed. Believing their son was mature enough to understand, Marcus met with Prince George in a private study at Kensington Palace. The young prince had grown tall and was beginning to look more like his father every day. He sat across from Marcus with the serious expression of someone preparing to discuss difficult topics. "I want to know everything," George said. "Not the sanitized version you might tell a child, but the truth. What was that man planning to do? How close did he get? What would have happened if you hadn't stopped him?" Marcus took a deep breath, considering his words carefully. He had always believed in honest communication, but this was different. This was telling someone about the danger they had been in, danger they hadn't even known existed at the time. "Your Royal Highness," Marcus began, "the man who entered your school that day had been planning his infiltration for months. He had created false credentials, studied the school's layout, and learned your routine. Based on what we found in his possession and what he told investigators, his intention was to abduct you during the lunch period when movement in the school was most chaotic." George listened intently, his face pale but composed. And if he had succeeded? The security services believe he would have attempted to take you off school grounds using a vehicle he had prepared. After that, we don't know for certain what his intentions were. He claimed he just wanted to meet you, but the evidence suggested something far more sinister. There was a long silence. Prince George stared out the window, processing this information. Finally, he turned back to Marcus. "You saw him when no one else did." "How?" Marcus appreciated the question. It showed that George was thinking analytically, rather than just emotionally. "I noticed details that didn't fit the pattern," Marcus explained. "His coveralls were too clean. His hands didn't look like those of a maintenance worker. And most importantly, he was paying too much attention to you. Real maintenance staff barely notice the students because they're focused on their work. This man was watching you, studying you, and you just knew something was wrong. Training taught me what to look for, but instinct told me to act. Sometimes in security work, you have to trust your gut even when you can't fully explain why something feels wrong. If I had waited to be certain, it might have been too late." Prince George nodded slowly. "My father says you tackled him, that you chased him through the school and physically stopped him?" "Yes, that's correct." "Were you scared?" Marcus considered lying, giving the brave answer that might be expected. But he had always been honest with George, and he wasn't going to start pretending now. "Yes, I was scared. I was scared that I might be wrong and cause unnecessary panic. I was scared that he might be armed and dangerous. But mostly, I was scared of what would happen if I didn't act. That fear pushed me forward rather than holding me back." George seemed to appreciate this honesty. "Thank you for telling me the truth," he said. "Everyone always tries to protect me from difficult things, but I'd rather know reality than live in a comfortable illusion." This conversation marked a turning point in their relationship. Prince George began to see Marcus not just as a protector, but as someone who respected him enough to be honest about hard truths. The young prince started asking more questions about security, about how threats were assessed, and about what his life might be like in the future as his public role increased. Marcus answered these questions thoughtfully, never sugarcoating the reality of being a future king, but also never making it seem hopeless or overwhelming. He helped George understand that security measures weren't meant to restrict his life, but to enable it, to give him the freedom to pursue his interests and develop his identity while staying safe. As the years continued to pass, Marcus found himself becoming something of a mentor to other young protection officers. He would share the story of that day at the school, not to glorify his own actions, but to illustrate important principles about awareness, instinct, and the courage to act on incomplete information. One day, he was approached by a young female officer named Sarah, who had just been assigned to protect one of George's younger siblings. She was nervous about the responsibility and asked Marcus for advice. "The most important thing," Marcus told her, "is to really see the person you're protecting. Not just as a royal figure or a job assignment, but as a real human being with their own personality, fears, and needs. When you understand them as a person, you can anticipate their behavior. You can identify what's normal for them and what's different. That's when you become truly effective." Sarah took his advice to heart and became an excellent protection officer in her own right. Watching her grow in the role, Akusa realized that his greatest legacy might not be the single act of heroism that had earned him recognition, but the influence he had on creating a culture of thoughtful, engaged protection throughout the service. King Charles, now several years into his reign, continued to take a personal interest in Marcus's career. At a private reception for senior protection staff, the king made a point of speaking with Marcus about his work. "Mr. Webb," the king said, "I've watched your career with great interest since that day we first spoke. You've justified every bit of faith I placed in you, and more. But what impresses me most is how you've used your experience to improve the entire service. You haven't just been an excellent officer yourself. You've helped create excellent officers throughout the organization." Marcus was humbled by the praise. "Your Majesty, I've been fortunate to work with talented people and to protect someone as remarkable as Prince George. It's been the privilege of my career." "And it will continue to be," the king replied. "George will need you more in the years ahead as he takes on greater responsibilities. The world is changing and the threats we face are evolving. Having someone with your experience and judgment will be invaluable." 10 years after the incident at the school, Marcus attended a private ceremony at Windsor Castle. Prince George, now 19 years old and preparing to begin his university studies, had requested that Marcus be present for a personal moment of gratitude. The young prince stood for a small gathering that included his parents, his siblings, and King Charles. He had prepared remarks, but when the moment came, he set aside his notes and spoke from the heart. "When I was 9 years old," George began, "someone came to my school intending to harm me. I didn't know it at the time. I was eating lunch with my friends, completely unaware of the danger I was in. But Marcus Webb knew. He saw what no one else saw. He acted when others might have hesitated. And because of his vigilance and courage, I'm standing here today." George turned to look directly at Marcus. "Over the past 10 years, you've been more than just my protection officer. You've been a constant presence in my life during some of its most challenging moments. You've kept me safe, yes, but you've also helped me understand what it means to serve others, to trust your instincts, and to act with courage when it matters most." The young prince's voice grew stronger. "As I prepare to take on more responsibilities and step further into public life, I know the challenges will only increase. But I also know that I'll face them with the confidence that comes from having someone like you watching over me. Someone who doesn't just follow procedures, but thinks independently. Someone who cares about me not just as a future king, but as a person." Prince William stepped forward then, holding a small box. "Marcus," he said, "what you did that day changed the course of our family's history. George is alive because of you. Everything he will accomplish in his life, every contribution he will make to this country and the Commonwealth, exists because you were alert and brave at a crucial moment." He opened the box to reveal a medal. Specially commissioned by the royal household, it was not an official state honor, but something more personal. A token of the family's gratitude that would never be publicly announced or recorded in official records. "This medal," William continued, "represents our family's private gratitude. It will never appear in the honors list or be mentioned in the press, but we wanted you to have something tangible that represents what you mean to us and what you've done for our son." Marcus accepted the medal with trembling hands, overwhelmed by the moment. He had never sought recognition for what he considered simply doing his duty, but the genuine emotion in the room touched him deeply. King Charles spoke next, his voice carrying the weight of both gratitude and authority. "Mr. Webb, you represent the very best of what it means to serve. Not seeking glory or recognition, but simply doing what's right when it matters most. The monarchy survives and thrives because of people like you who work in the shadows to keep it safe." After the ceremony, Marcus had a private moment with Prince George. The young man had grown into someone confident and thoughtful, shaped by both his unique circumstances and the people around him who had guided his development. "Marcus," George said quietly, "I know you'll be with me for many years to come. But I want you to know that no matter where life takes us, no matter what roles we both fulfill, I'll never forget what you did. You gave me a future, and I intend to make it count for something." Marcus felt the weight of those words. He had saved Prince George's life that day at the school, but in doing so, he had also shaped his own destiny. His career, his purpose, his sense of meaning had all been defined by those few crucial minutes when he trusted his instincts and acted decisively as he left Windsor Castle that evening. The medal secure in his jacket pocket, Marcus reflected on the journey that had brought him here. He thought about the young protection officer he had been 10 years ago, uncertain and still learning his craft. He thought about the split-second decision that had changed everything, and the responsibility that had come with the recognition of his actions. But mostly, he thought about Prince George and the man he was becoming. Marcus knew that the years ahead would bring new challenges and new threats. The world was changing rapidly, and the nature of security was evolving with it. There would be more difficult decisions to make, more moments when split-second judgments would determine outcomes. Yet Marcus felt ready for whatever came next. He had learned that true protection wasn't just about physical safety. It was about creating an environment where someone could grow, develop, and eventually fulfill their destiny. It was about being present not just in moments of danger, but in the quiet moments in between, building trust and understanding that would prove invaluable when challenges arose. Years later, when Marcus eventually retired from active protection duty, he would look back on his career with deep satisfaction. He had helped keep safe a young man who would one day be king, and in doing so, he had served his country in the most meaningful way possible. The private promotion from King Charles, given secretly all those years ago, had marked not just the recognition of a single act of heroism, but the beginning of a legacy that would influence royal protection for generations too. Prince George would go on to have a distinguished public life, serving his country with dedication and wisdom. And though the public would never know the full story of that day at the school, those closest to the future king would always remember the man whose vigilance and courage had made everything else possible. Marcus Webb had done more than stop a threat. He had preserved a future, protected a family's hope, and proven that sometimes the most important heroism happens in moments that the world never sees. Performed by people whose names will never be famous, but whose actions echo through history in profound and lasting ways. The bond between the protection officer and the prince remains strong throughout their lives, a testament to trust earned in the most crucial of moments and maintained through years of faithful service. It was a relationship built on mutual respect, quiet courage, and the understanding that some debts can never truly be repaid. It's only honored through continued dedication to the values that matter most.